Hello everyone and welcome to another collections showcase, and today we're going to be looking at some more prototype slash test shop pieces that I have acquired over the last few months, because I have been picking these up for a while now but I just haven't got around to doing a video on them until now. But we have here a TARDIS, a couple of Daleks and a couple of figures, but it is the TARDIS that we're going to start with. So the TARDIS is obviously a First Doctor one. I believe it is from the Adventure in Space and Time version, for reasons that I will come back to in a moment. But overall, it's obviously unpainted. The blue of the actual TARDIS seems to be the base colour of the plastic, although the base and possibly the windows do seem to have been primed, which again is not uncommon with, you know, prototypes for that to be sort of an overall general thing done. And obviously if I open it up as well, you can see that, you know, the base interior is all fully primed. The back of the windows, I don't know how well it comes up on camera, you can see a few sort of paint marks, which again makes me think that's all where that's been primed. But as you can see, you know, the inside of the plastic is the same as the outside, so it's all certainly seems to be this sort of slightly darker blue, which might initially made me think that this was the Unearthly Child version over the Adventure in Space and Time one. But the reason that it is almost certainly the Adventure in Space and Time one is because, as you can see, it has switches and things on the bottom. Also, as you can see, it doesn't have any kind of printed stamped on serial number as well, which a lot of them have, or anything that seems to have been sort of printed on there, as it were. But it does have electronics, and we're going to come back to the electronics in a minute, because one other feature that on this I do just want to bring around, which side is it, is here, this side. You can see that the actual plastic is slightly warped here, which again makes me think that this is obviously some sort of early test shot that, you know, perhaps didn't come out of the mould very well, which again would explain why it's, you know, it's all sort of been primed up and changed and things like that, because they're obviously just using it as a base plastic one. It's interesting that it looks like right from the front, but it's only when you turn around there you can see that how warped it is on that side. But the most interesting thing about this, which again leads me to believe, and certainly seem to be, that this is the Adventure in Space and Time one, is the electronics. Because if I turn on the switch and turn off my light, this is where you'll see its most interesting feature, because if I put it down, you can see that the light on top is in fact yellow, rather than the standard white that came in the Adventure in Space and Time one. Obviously, it's certainly interesting that it's got a yellow lamp in it, but it kind of also adds to the idea that this is a test shot one, that they've perhaps just gotten the first spare lamp that they had, or the fact that maybe it was originally going to have a yellow lamp in the Adventure in Space and Time one. I'm not sure. I'm still sort of researching into this one, because it is a bit of a dark horse, as it were, in terms of things. But you know, all of the signs point towards this being a sort of test shot version of the TARDIS. So, you know, it's a great find. It's certainly one to have. It's certainly an odd one, but you know, it's quite nice to have a sort of oddity here and there, and it's nice to have a TARDIS. I actually don't have really. I've only got one TARDIS prototype in my collection, which is one of the early Fifth Doctor prototype TARDISes. So to sort of have this one to add to it is certainly a nice one, and it's nice to sort of have it looking sort of, you know, factory fresh, literally factory fresh, as it were. It's a very odd one for this one. Now, next up here we have the two figures. I'm going to put these both in the one bit of this video because there's not a huge amount to say about them, or at least certainly about one of them. So first of all, we have the 10th Doctor in his blue suit with his 3D glasses. Now, I'd seen this variant floating around for a while, and I'd never really questioned it. And then recently, obviously, there was a large lot of prototypes went up on eBay that had the Satan Pit Rose Tyler, the man from the Planet of the Ood, the guard guy, and a few other sort of ones that were very sort of, people were, you know, it was quite surprising that we saw some in there that we didn't know. But in the middle of that was one of these. Now, this isn't the one that was up on eBay. I'm not sure who got the one that was up on eBay, but I had no idea until this point that this was never actually produced. I always sort of assumed that I'd seen it around so often that it was in some deluxe box set But having looked into it, it's not. It's never been released. I'm not quite sure what this one was going to be released for, but I was convinced. I was utterly convinced that I had one of these. So I went through my entire collection, couldn't find one. Went through all of my sort of random boxes of, boxes and box sets that I've got, and there wasn't one in there. And I just figured maybe I'd just mistaken it for a 10th Doctor in his blue suit with his glasses, or in his brown suit with the 3D glasses. I didn't think anything more of it. And then I went through my box of spares, and lo and behold, in the bottom of my box of spares was one of these. And I have trawled through things that I have received over the years, because I do try and keep, an idea of where things come from. And my belief is that I got this one in a random job lot of figures that I bought on eBay for spares. I think it was one of the ones that I only paid about sort of 20 odd quid for about 50 figures. And this one was sat in the bottom of there, and I just flung it to one side, didn't think anything more of it. So I've had a prototype sat in my boxes of spares for about 3 years and not known it. So that's quite an interesting, it's quite an interesting find on that one. But there's not a whole lot more to say about it. It's more kind of, it's great to know that I've got it there, but it's also just, it's kind of proof that you should really look at what you get, because half the time you never know how, where things are going to pop up from and where you're going to find them. I know a couple of other people who found prototypes just in a random box of figures that they've been given because people haven't known what they've been selling. It's always worth sort of keeping an eye out on these things. But the Dark Eyes 8th, moving on now. Now this one is an interesting one, because I was chasing up a lead, because I do put my feelers out when it comes to prototype figures, and I was chasing up a lead where somebody had said that they had some Big Finish exclusive prototypes, and obviously my mind immediately jumped to the thought of, oh my god, we're going to get some new Big Finish exclusives. Unfortunately, that is not what this led to. This is what that led to, so don't get your hopes up there. But also knowing that some prototype Dalek Big Finish exclusives popped up recently and was purchased by Scott over at Gallifrey Customs, I thought, oh, maybe it's going to be one of those, or another one of those. And it ended up leading to this, which at immediate look doesn't seem to be a prototype. Big Finish exclusive, yes, because he's got the gloss black shoes. But it's when you get a bit up closer that some of the details are different. Because as well as the black shoes, the buttons on his coat, and I really hope this comes up on camera, the buttons on his coat are actually more of a sort of silver brass rather than the standard sort of more orangey gold that we've had. And this certainly again seems to be the Big Finish version of the figure, because the paint apps, particularly on the face, are more solid, is the only way I can describe them. If you look at some of the later releases, most recently in like the B&M set, or even the later Big Finish sets that went to B&M, the paint applications on the 8th Doctor's face were much lighter and much sort of less defined. They were much smoother. So it's interesting that this has got the variant of the black shoes, which is down here. Obviously my finger's pointing up, you can't see them. He's got the black shoes. I've also noticed on his trousers he's got some sort of pen marks and things like that, which is kind of the sort of thing again that you would see out of a factory. The joints on the arms and the legs are also plain black pegs, like they've not been sort of properly painted up and everything yet. But the thing that is really, really, really odd on this, and I don't know why it's such a tiny detail, and you're probably looking at it and it's staring you in the face right now, pun intended, because if we zoom in right up on his face, you can see that his eyes are a much lighter blue. Now, I've dug out and looked up. Unfortunately, I don't have one right here to hand, but I've looked at my Big Finish exclusive 8th Doctor, which is still in its box, but also the non-Big Finish exclusive versions, and his eyes are a much darker blue. So it's interesting that this one's got lighter eyes, which, when you combine all these things together, certainly does seem to imply that this is a sort of test shot factory prototype version, whatever you want to call it, that seems to sort of be from the Big Finish exclusive set. So again, it's a very, very subtle one, but like the 10th Doctor with his glasses, it's sometimes the very subtle variational differences which can make all the difference and make sort of, you know, things a prototype and stand out and things like that. So again, you know, rather like the 10th Doctor, it's an odd one, and it's certainly not one that I would have given a second glance to otherwise if I hadn't sort of sought it out and followed it up. But, you know, I managed to get it for a cheap price, and it was one of those ones that, at the end of the day, if it had been a normal figure, I would have had another one for my spares. But for the price I paid for it, it was worth the risk, and this certainly seems to have been one that's paid off. But again, another one that I want to do a little bit more research into. Now we move on to the Daleks, and this is actually what seems to be quite a recent prototype test shot, whichever you want to call it, because this is from the most recent History of the Daleks set from Remembrance of the Daleks. As you can see, it is the Supreme. But the first thing that people may notice about this are the slats on the midsection are in fact the Renegade Grey versions, which has the slats but also has the wider slats on it, has the mesh, sorry, but also the wider slats on them, which are painted silver. Now obviously my immediate first thought on this is that it is in fact a factory error. That was, you know, my first thinking on that front, because, you know, it happens, it wouldn't surprise me. And, you know, I picked it up again for a cheap price because I thought, hey, if it's a factory error piece, it's still a great little piece to have. But when I got it and I had a look, I noticed on the base there is no, again, printed or stamped serial number in there, which leads me to believe that this is, again, probably an early test shot / prototype piece. But at the very least, even if it's a factory error version, it means that they still haven't stamped it, which still makes it a factory error. So this could be either, but I do seem to recall, and this is where I'm going to ask for people's help, I do seem to recall seeing a promotional image, or possibly one of the many leaked images that perhaps didn't get around as much, which seemed to show this Dalek with these slats in silver. Now, if anybody has that picture or knows where to find that picture, please let me know, because that would be a huge bit of sort of confirmation on this one. But again, from all the people that I've asked so far and that I've, you know, put the feelers out to, they all seem to concur that this is probably a, you know, an early test shot prototype piece of an early version of it, where, you know, the slats were either put on wrong by mistake, or again, it's a factory error piece. But either way, it's a lovely little piece to have because it's just one of those more little unique ones. But I've saved the best until last, and I'm sure some people are going to be sitting there going, "What do you mean the best? It's just it's a prototype primed version test shot of the original new series, Dalek, the Series 1, the inaccurate sculpt." Oh my friends, this may be so much more than that. And I genuinely am still slightly amazed if what I've got here is what people say it is. So let me take you over some of the things on this. Again, it appears to be your standard new Series 1 Dalek. No, Series 1 new Series Dalek, whatever you want to call it. The original version that was, you know, the slightly fatter, inaccurate version. But if I turn it around to this side first of all, and I bring in here, because I don't have one that's got the spheres off the side of it, but it is a spare piece from my box of spares of a new series Dalek. The first thing that you can see is the fixings on this one are round. The fixings on the release one are square with a round recess. So what that means is this section, this piece of the Dalek, is an unused sculpt, because obviously that's different, so it's an entirely different unused tooling on that bit. The second thing if I bring it back round to the front and zoom in, is when compared to a released new series Dalek. This is obviously the genetic handprint version of the Metaltron Dalek that we got released. The dome lights are actually eerily more accurate. They're not as squat, and they sort of sit proud a bit more. These ones are slightly sort of fatter and more sort of squat. So again, these dome lights are pieces that were seemingly changed before the final one. But the thing that really stands out the most when you look at the front is the slats on these ones. The bolts detailing are noticeably larger than they are on the released one, which means this whole front piece is again an entirely unused sculpt. It's not the one that was used for the release. Interestingly enough as well, while I've got them up close here, if you take the appendages out of the released new series one, they will not go into these ball joints because the ball joint holes are not as wide. In fact, I think if you look carefully enough, you can see how much of a... It's ever so slight, but these are noticeably smaller than the release ones, which again also means that the ball joints are also from a different unused sculpt. But even then, that's not where the differences in sculpt end. Because if we look at the base of them, and I apologise for the condition of the one on the left, but it still just sort of does prove the point. The released version, which you can see has the printed serial number on here, obviously this one doesn't have the printed serial number, but it also doesn't have, and I've never fully worked out what these are for, these loop bits are not on this one. But also, the struts around some edges of them, obviously you've got one at the top. These two are not here on this one. Then you've got those two. These ones are not here. And then you've got the corner ones, and then at the very bottom you don't have these ones. So again, this base, unused tooling. But even then, the differences don't end there, and this next bit I've had to take pictures of because there was no way I could have captured this on camera. But if we open up the new series released version of the Dalek, you can see how the interior sort of struts go across and how that all looks. And you can see the sort of midsection piece has a sort of rounded lip to it, where it fits against the body. But if we open up the prototype version, you can see inside that it actually has almost this sort of webbing between the two, which is two halves on the strut, which is completely different. But then also on the midsection piece, you can see that it's got a more sort of angular fixing, which again shows these are all pieces that were not used in the final sculpt. The pins that hold the base to the body have sort of almost been sculpted in and fixed in. They're different. And at the very, very front, and this one is a little bit more difficult to see in comparison, but the sort of square fixing on the right-hand side in the picture sits lower than it does on the released version. So I have been asking around both those actually in the industry, the toy industry, and those involved in the making of the figures and things like that, other collectors of prototypes and things like that, and what this seems to be is an original unused tooling for the new series Dalek. And it's possible, and this bit is so hard to verify, but the fact that more than 3 people have said the same thing to me leads me to believe that there is certainly a grain of truth in this. That what this isn't just an unreleased tooling. It may be only one of 3, or possibly even the only one of its kind in existence. Now, obviously, if that's the case, that is absolutely insane. And I can't even begin to fathom what that makes this worth, because I got this one on eBay, as I said, when all those other ones popped up. This was another one that I bought, and I just didn't think anything of it when I got it. I just thought it was a test shop piece. But if this is something so much more, which again, all the indications certainly point it to be, it's just staggering that this has wound its way into my collection, because it's potentially a piece of Doctor Who figure history. As I said, this is one that I'm still putting research and things into now, but whichever way you look at it, this is largely made up of pieces of tooling that never made it into the finished products, as far as I can see. Or at the very least, if they did make it into the finished products, it wasn't something that was clearly used for very long, for whatever reason. But of all of the, of all my years of taking apart Daleks and things like that, I've never seen round fixings purely on the side. Don't think I've ever seen an interior fixing like that. Certainly, I don't think I've ever seen the interior sort of bit, done like that. It's just, I still don't know what to make of it. And it's a real mystery, but it's certainly one that's absolutely fantastic to have, because to think that this could be something that rare is just absolutely phenomenal. And like I said, even if it isn't, even if it turns out to just be a normal test shot that was used on a few pieces for maybe a run of so many, it's still an original piece, it's still a factory piece, and it's still a wonderful piece to have, But for now, that brings to a close another collections showcase. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, share, it really helps me out a lot. I am in the description below for a link to my Patreon. I am still doing my figure animation. I am still planning to do an update on it, but as some of you may know, we recently bought a house, so we've been doing lots of DIY amongst work and other things, and we're trying to get in there before the 1st of March, so I've just been very, very, very busy. But for the meantime, all of your donations are greatly received, and for the smallest donation, you can get your name at the end of my videos. I salute you all, and I will see you with another video very soon.